Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast. You're joining me, Bella Rose, as I dive deep into the beauty, power, and truths about intimacy. Learn not only the practicals, but the heart behind what making love is all about. Delight your marriage. All right, welcome. This is Bella. Thank you for joining. I'm so excited because today I actually have a former student on, Ben, and he has been married 45 years. So he knows a thing or two about how to have a very long marriage and how to actually have health sexually in the length of time for a marriage. So this is broken into two parts. The first part, we're focusing on his journey in marriage, as well as some really key changes that he made to impact his health, sexually speaking. And then the second half is also the trajectory of how things changed in his marriage. And he even talks about some things that changed as a result of he and I working together. And it's just a fantastic conversation. I think he's just a very special soul that you'll learn a lot just through the different stories that he shares. And he's well researched. And I think you're going to pick up a lot, even scientific and medical things you can do even right now to impact and enhance your sex life. So really excited about what this means for you and your marriage. Let's go ahead and dive in.
I would love to. Thanks for having me on. I just learned so much from you and appreciate you so much. And I'm honored that you gave me this opportunity to talk. And I hope that whoever listens to this something good, will come out of it. Every time I attend a course, I always come away with at least one thing. And I hope that that'll be the same for the people that listen to us. Sometimes I learn what I don't want to do, but hopefully they'll find something that'll help them in their lives. Yeah, so I grew up in a little small town. The atmosphere at our house when I was growing up was tense and just discord. A lot of fighting between the kids. So I escaped as much as I could. When I was older, I would stay with friends on the weekends and just kind of stay away as much as possible. So it was tough. So when I was young, probably about 12, I went to a Baptist encampment and became a Christian. And I started praying that God would send me a wonderful wife and that we could have a great family, but it wouldn't be like the family, that I grew up in. And so God has been really good to answer that prayer. And, we have an amazing family. I was president of my high school, and I've been president of about every organization that I've ever been in.
I do not doubt that in the least.
And my wife, she's an amazing girl. And we are from the same town. She's a year older than I am, but I've known her for a long time. And God did bless me with an absolutely fabulous person. And so we got married really early. So I was 20, she was 21, and we've been married 45 years.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's so great.
One of the things that I'd encourage my kids to do was look for a potential spouse, in a church setting. And so they both did that. They were involved in church singles groups when they got out of college, and that's how they met their spouses. So we're just really, really blessed.
Yeah.
Family.
That's amazing. Wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So you started out, praying that God would give you a marriage that didn't really resemble the family that you started in, that you saw modeled for you. So can you tell me, when you got married, your first years, what was, if you don't mind sharing, kind of what was the nature of intimacy like between the two of you?
I would describe our early years of marriage as ignorance is bliss first. I would describe as delayed gratification because when I got into dental school, I wanted to go to graduate school, and in order to go to graduate school, you really had to make all A's. My wife was a teacher. She just graduated from school, and so we both roll in about 6 in the evening, her from work and me from school, and she'd make dinner, and then we had a little 2 bedroom, a terrible apartment, but the second bedroom we converted it into a study, and I was probably sitting down and studying by 7, and then about 9 o'clock she'd come in and give me a little peck on the cheek and say, "I love you," and then she'd go to bed. Most nights I would be up till midnight. On some weeks when there was testing, I'd be up to 2, 3 in the morning studying, and so we pretty much didn't see each other, during the week other than have dinner together, and then on the weekends. But by the time the weekends rolled around, we were just brain dead. And so I was in a fraternity again with party guys, and so we would usually go to they call them relaxers. So at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoons, we'd go to a bar, just hang out with the dental students and the wives and nursing students and hygienists, and just drink beer and talk about how hard the week was. My wife also had another job because we were broke. So we would work retail on the weekends. We were really in survival mode. So, we really didn't have, you wouldn't call it a very intimate lifestyle. I think my wife's father died when she was 9. And her mother remarried, but he was an alcoholic. The second husband was an alcoholic. And so really, my wife really didn't have a relationship with a man. And they didn't really model, what you teach. And so, I hate to say that, but that might have worked in our favor, sadly, because I don't think I didn't know what to give, and she didn't know what she was missing. Because I think if you ask her about our early on years, she'd say, well, everything was fine. And it was all we knew. But in our defense, we didn't know anybody that had the kind of lifestyle, the intimacy lifestyle that you teach. And 45 years ago, there were really no resources that I know of, that were out there. So I think, unfortunately, most of the world, I guess, they operated like we did. So yeah. I'm not sure you're the expert in that area, but I didn't see it around, around.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So if you would be able to go back to some of those seasons. So if I were to break up some of the seasons that you mentioned, you've got the time that you were in dental school, the time that maybe you were building your business, the time that you were raising young kids, the times that you were raising teenagers, now the time you're empty nesters, the time you're, enjoying grandkids. If we were to break it up, I'm sure there's other seasons you could probably define in there. But if we were to think about maybe even going back to some of those seasons, now what you know about intimacy and that kind of thing, what would you suggest would have been a better way of living, do you think?
Well, there's one other thing I did want to share with you. We started going to church. So while we were dating, I told her, I said, well, if we're going to date, I want us to go to church. And so we started going to church, and then we found a church when we were in dental school. And the second year that we were married, she accepted Christ and, was baptized. So, that was awesome. Yeah. And then another thing that was, I think, a really significant occurrence is that our last year that I was in graduate school, I got into graduate school, and so she decided to go back to school, and she went to graduate school at the same time. So I got a part-time job after school and would work till midnight, but she would had to drive quite a ways to go to college. So both would roll in about midnight. So nothing had really changed, but we saw, and this has to be a God thing. We saw that there was going to be a Bible conference in the city where my school was, and for some reason we decided to go. And the man has passed away, but the man that held the Bible conference was Major Ian Thomas, and he was an amazing man. And what he taught was that Christianity was really about turning your life over to the leadership of the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And up until that point, we never had heard that concept. And so, Christianity for us was more like go to church on Sunday and ask God to forgive you for what you did, during the week. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot to pray over. But that blew our minds. I'll never forget the last night of the conference. I was in tears because I really don't think I understood what it meant to be fully turned over to God, and so that was a huge change for us and an eye-opening experience, and one of the best things that ever happened to us. And one of the things I wanted to share with you, because I don't think we've ever talked about this before in the group. Some of the people that are listening to this, they'll say, "Well, duh," but some others may not. And one of the things that Major Thomas taught was that animals, birds and insects in the animal world, he gives them an instinct, and that instinct protects them. And a couple of examples he used was that if you put a bowl of alcohol in front of a dog or a horse, they wouldn't drink that because their instinct would say, "Hey, no, that's not good for you." But men will drink till they can't walk. And another example he used were birds as they migrate from north to south. How do they know to go thousands and thousands of miles, but they end up back in the same home or destination every time? Or salmon when they migrate. And so he said that we aren't born with an instinct, and so if you have the Holy Spirit, you've got an instinct that'll teach you right from wrong and help you see, if you're going down the wrong path. And that really helps me understand, when I look around the world and I see things on television and some of the wickedness, and I want to shake my head and say, I can't believe this is what's going on, or in marriages that you see. And it's just, we don't have that Holy Spirit within us, and we don't have God, showing us the way. So that was probably one of the most significant things that ever happened to me in the first 5 years of our marriage was meeting him and reading some of his books, and I actually became friends with him. So it was
oh wow,
yeah, he was an amazing person.
Wow.
Back to your question, what would I do with our marriage? Is I would change the priorities because my wife is very ambitious, and I am too, and so pretty much until maybe 10 years ago, marriage intimacy's been not that high of a priority for us. So I'd change our priorities. I would have hired you as a coach, but you were alive. And I would have just cherished her more, like you helped her out more. We had a consultant early on that was not a Christian, and one of his favorite mottos was only do things that you enjoy to do, and the rest farm it out. So we had hired a lady that had a degree in early childhood growth and development that came into our house, and she helped out with the kids. And then, we had a maid. And so we farmed out things that we didn't enjoy doing, but I wouldn't do that if I had to do over again. I would have spent more time at home. I would have helped with the dishes and, helped with the homework and, not focus so much on my career. So, I'm not, we accomplished a lot, but I'm not particularly proud, of how we did it or what we did. But we spent a lot of time teaching Sunday school, and we taught Bible study fellowship. So we were really involved in church, teaching and, tithing and taking the kids to school. We picked out a church that had a really strong youth group and got our kids plugged in there. And we got that idea from listening to Billy Graham. He had a book on answers to life's most difficult questions, and one of them was, where do you send your kids to school? And he felt like you should send them to public school, and then help them, find a church that they could meet friends with, and then find those friends and hang out with those friends in school. And then when they were challenged growing up, then they'd have their parents, to help them understand what was going on into the world, instead of raising them in a bubble and you drop them off into college and they said, oh my gosh, where's this world from? I didn't know a world existed. And if you look at the statistics, 70% of the kids that are Christians, when they get into college, they turn away from the Lord. So, I don't know. Things have changed a lot since our kids were young, and you look at what's going on in the public schools and you think, wow, would I, especially what the curriculums are in school, would I don't know what I would do. We used to just say we're going to take school one year at a time. One of the things I thought was interesting in this public school and the high school is they had a program that's called peer assistantship leading. They call it PALS, and the student body and the teachers would vote on kids that they thought were exemplary and they were good leaders and they were good kids, and they could talk to other kids that were having problems, in the school. And it was interesting that I would say 95% at least of the kids that were in that peer group, the leadership group, they went to church. I mean, they were Christian kids. So you could see a difference, in those kids.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so it's interesting. I think what I'd love to ask you about is, because a lot of the people that are going to watch this are very goal-oriented, ambitious, achievement-oriented people like yourself. And it's interesting to hear you, which you're pretty close to retirement age, I think, right? You're thinking about doing that in a couple months.
Yeah.
You probably not unofficially, because officially you're going to be doing a ton of different things, but in that zone. And, you've gotten from a place, if you don't mind me saying, you came from a place where you said you guys were broke, right? But now you guys are absolutely, wonderfully able to give to others and in those financial ways. And I think that a lot of times people at where they are now, let's say they've got children at home, let's say they're about, between their 40s and 50s or something. And what I often see is this like pressurized sense of they need to achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve at the expense of loving their spouse well, loving their kids well, these kinds of things. And I don't know, how would you maybe talk to somebody in that spot?
Well, there's a really famous dentist. He's passed away. His name's Dr. Pankey. He's from Florida, and he used to teach the cross of life. And I think to do things well, you can't do a lot of things. So, and I think you have to sit down with your spouse and say, hey, okay, and I think you should do that before you get married, honestly, to the person that you're thinking about marrying, and say, hey, what's important to you in your life? Where do because time goes by so fast. At the end of 40 years, like we are, what do you want to have accomplished, in 40 years? And one of the things that I told my kids early on is that the most important thing that you can do is, find Christ, get a relationship with Christ. And the second most important thing is who you choose to marry. And that can be a blessing or it can be a curse. And so I'd sit down and I would prioritize with my spouse. And so, we decided that we wanted to be physically fit. So we've always carved out, an hour a day. Our seasons of life have changed over the time, but we want to work out an hour a day if we can, and to eat right, and then to, pray every day and study the Bible and try to find out what God wants us to do, serve others in church. And then we want to read some every day and, grow. But by the time you spend time with your family and you exercise and you do some Bible study and you do work, there's not a lot of time left. And so I think I bit off too much. I was out of balance as far as my career. So I built one of the most successful practices in the country.
Wow.
So I had other specialists that worked for me, and I had employees, and so I hung around with some very successful other specialists. We had a study club, and it was by invitation only, and we were super high achievers. So I think I got that cross out of balance. So I think you have to decide, hey, how much is enough? And you can overdo anything. You can overdo exercise, or you can overdo. Monks spend all their time praying. So it's just it's keeping things healthy. A healthy balance. And like my dad told me a long time ago, my father-in-law was very successful. All he did was work. So I was bragging to my dad one day about this deal that he had done where he made millions of dollars on this deal. And my dad, he's very wise. He said, you can only wear one Rolex at a time, or drive one Cadillac at a time, and eat one steak at a time. So he said, how much do you really need? And, he just set me on my heels because I had a Rolex and I didn't like it and I sold it. I'm a vegan now, so I don't eat steak anymore.
That's right.
And you can't, how many hearses do you see, behind, at funerals? You're not going to take anything to heaven with you. So how much really, is enough?
Yeah, that's beautiful. So I want to ask about some things around intimacy and as you all grew older. How did menopause affect you all?
Well, menopause was a tough time for us.
Yeah.
Because my wife lost most of her desire really to be intimate, and she lost her ability to become moist, sex, and it's really kind of interesting. She's going to kill me when she hears this recording, but her complexions really seemed to change. And she it was almost like she was in constant PMS. I mean, she just was angry a lot. And of course, she had the hot flashes, and she didn't sleep well, at night at all. So she was pretty miserable. And there's so many things that I've learned working with you. And, one of the things that we discovered with one of the tests that we took was that I'm a learner. I think was number one on my list. And so I've always been a good student. I've always loved to read. And so I thought, okay, I need to read about menopause. So most of my resources when it comes to intimacy and lifestyle is good. I try to find Christian resources. And so I read a Christian book about what happens to women's brains during menopause. And so it gave me some grace when I realized that she was just losing some hormones and it was affecting the way that, she was thinking. And then I started reading some other books, Christian books, just on relationships and intimacy. And so one of the books they gave a credit to Paul Byerly, who does the Generous Husband blog. And so I started following him, and then he gave credit to you. He mentioned you in one of his blogs. And so I thought, well, who is this lady? And so I found Bella, which is another one of the greatest things, that ever happened. And then I was at my physician, he's a close friend of mine. He's an internal medicine doctor. He scored number one on the national boards in internal medicine, and he's very conservative. And so I trust him. He's brilliant. And so I was in for a checkup, and he started asking me some questions about, am I more fatigued? Am I how am I sleeping at night? And what's my mood, my energy level? And so when I answered him, he said, I think we should test your hormone level, because he says it sounds like you're low in testosterone. And so sure enough, I was completely out of gas.
Wow.
Yeah. So my testosterone level was about as low as it can get.
Wow.
And so he said, I think, you need to start taking testosterone. And so I started taking these testosterone pellets, and they're bioidentical testosterone pellets. They're not synthetic. And I could not believe the difference that it made. I started sleeping at night, and I started putting on more muscle mass when working out. Started getting stronger and better erections. Mm-hmm. And so, I said, to the internal medicine doctor, I said, I think maybe out of gas too. And he said, well, bring her in. So he tested her. Sure enough, she was, low on estrogen and testosterone. And so he started giving her the pellets, and it was like we were 25 again.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was amazing. Sleep all night. Her sex drive probably higher than it's ever been.
Wow.
And it was like we were alive again.
Oh.
So it's been pretty amazing, the benefits that we've received from this. The company's called BioT. So I would encourage anybody that is starting to have some of those symptoms, that they look into it. You can go to the BioT website, and you can do a doctor locator in your area.
Okay.
And that might be a really good resource, for somebody that wants to be, checked out. I would try to find a doctor that specializes in longevity and does BioT, so they can help them with prevention, as well. Because my wife had to have a stent, and that really scared us because we thought we had been eating properly, and turns out she had a 95% blockage of her main coronary artery. So I went to work again and started reading, and I found a book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease by Caldwell Esselstyn, and then I found a couple other books. One's called How Not to Die by Dr. Gregor. Why are you laughing?
How not to die. It's a good one. Yeah. Sounds great.
So Dr. Greger's reviewed, he's got 10 physicians that work for him. It's a nonprofit. And they've reviewed over 1 million articles in the last 10 years. And they've culled out the biased articles. So they're all unbiased articles. And he's boiled down the results into chapters. And the chapters are on the different diseases that kill people that live off in the West, in the United States and Europe. And so it's basically 15 chapters, and each chapter relatively short, but it involves, heart disease or breast cancer or prostate cancer, addresses each one of them. And, what he's found is a plant-based diet will pretty well protect you from the top 15 killers.
Wow.
And cardiovascular disease is the number one killer. And the number one symptom, do you know what the number one symptom of cardiovascular disease is?
Is it clogged arteries?
Sudden death.
Oh.
Which is pretty scary because that's what happened to my wife. So she's developed chest pain. And I remember from my dental studies that we needed to give her some adult aspirin. So I gave her one, and she continued to have pain. And then, an hour later, I gave her another, and she ended up giving her 5. But before we got her to the emergency room, and the doctor said that probably saved her life.
Whoa.
Yeah, so she had to have an emergency stent placement. And so we went to work and started trying to figure out, what our problem was. And both of our cholesterols were within what the American Cardiology Association says is normal, which is under 200. But it turns out the research shows it needs to be below 150.
Really?
Yeah. My wife taking her cholesterol down from, I think it was around 207, and the last time she got it measured, it was 114.
Wow.
Yeah. And her LDL, the bad cholesterol, she has it down around 50.
Wow.
And I think you don't want it to be over 70 if you've had a cardiovascular event. So if you haven't had a cardiovascular event, you don't want your LDL to be over 100. And I think mine is around 70 now.
Wow.
They're finding that erectile dysfunction is also a symptom of cardiovascular disease because those penile arteries they're really tiny. They're about 1/5 the diameter of a coronary artery. And so those arteries start filling up with little plaques. And so you can't get as much blood to your penis. And that's why the penis is unable to become fully erect or erect, is because of the plaques in the artery.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's great to know. 1/5 the size. Wow. And Dr. Esselstyn, I'm familiar with. I've read some of his stuff as well. The China study, did he do it, or was it another gentleman?
Colin Campbell wrote the China study, and that was the third book I read, and that book will blow your mind. It's a little scientific, but it's an amazing read. And there's a direct correlation of prostate cancer and lung cancer and breast cancer to diet. And I would really encourage people to grab those books and read, because there's a lot of rumors out there. There's a lot of people that are selling diets, and a lot of those diets are going to give you heart problems and erectile dysfunction.
Yeah.
And keto is one of them. So I would really encourage, people to do your homework. Don't do what, one of your buddies tell you.
Okay, so Ben and I just kind of started talking about the health things that impact intimacy. But I will tell you, on our next show coming out next week, we talk so much more in depth, and he is so well researched, but he's also lived it. He's in in his 46th year of marriage, so he really understands. And there's some medical interventions as well as health practices that he and his wife do that really impact things in their age now, where most couples are really challenged in this way. So I want to encourage you and give you those tools. So I'm very much looking forward to having him again next week. And in the meantime, I'd love to offer you a free resource. It's my framework that actually gives you the insights on how to love your spouse the way that they receive love. So if you're a husband, how does your wife actually want to be loved? What is most important to her? So that when you love her and fill her up in those ways, she will naturally respond to fill you up in the ways that you receive love. So this framework is for husbands and for wives, and it's to really understand your spouse. So go to delightyourmarriage.com/framework. Delightyourmarriage.com/framework, and you can get that download. All right, God bless you, and I look forward to next week. Take care.